Hello, in this video we're going to create an animated fan using JavaFX. So we're going to write our own class for drawing the fan to the screen, and then we're going to use a timeline object to control our animation. Now this is quite a long video compared to what we're used to, so sit back and enjoy. By the end of this video what we're going to have is a window. And down the bottom of the window there'll be three buttons. In this top section of the window, we're going to have a circle with a fan inside. Now, excuse me, my drawing is not the best. Something like that. We're going to have a resume. I think I've got these around the wrong way, in the wrong order, and reverse. So these buttons are going to control the fan, and when the animation is playing, our fan is going to appear to spin around. So that's enough to get started, so let's jump over to Eclipse, where we'll create a new Java project. I'll call this fan animation, and we will add a new class to this project, also called fan animation. Okay. So I'll extend this to give us some room, and the first thing we'll do is make our class extend from application. Okay, and now we'll create our start method. Stage object as its parameter. Alright. So what we're going to do first is get the three buttons out of the way. Now, you've already should know by now how to get three buttons nicely laid out at the bottom of the screen. So we're going to place these buttons in a horizontal box called hbox. The constructor we'll use will actually pass in some spacing there. So we'll pass in 5 as a parameter to the constructor. Next up, we need some buttons. Make sure we're importing the JavaFX versions. BT pause equals new button, and we pass in the string that we want displayed. One for resume, and one for reverse. Okay, next up we're going to set the alignment of our horizontal box to center. So pos.center. And now we can add the three buttons to the horizontal box. So hbox get children dot add all. Okay, so now what we're going to do is create a border pane, and the border pane is going to store our horizontal box and our fan, which we will get to in just a minute. So a border pane, we'll call this pane, and the first thing we'll do for now is add our horizontal box to the bottom. Okay, so what we'll do now is set up our primary stage. Now to do this, we'll need to first create our scene object. We pass in our border pane as the first parameter, and then the size of the window we'll set to 200 by 200. Next up, we set up our primary stage. So the title. Set the scene. And show the primary stage. Okay, so now what we'll do is jump out of our start method and create a main method. And call launch. Okay, so with that, oops, I put a space in here accidentally. So with that, we can run our program now, and we get the very start. So we get our pause, resume, and reverse buttons, how we expect. So what we're going to do now is work on drawing our fan to the screen. And the way we're going to do this is to create a new class inside this file. So we'll jump all the way down out of fan animation. And down here we will create a new class which is going to be our own pane. So class fan pane, and we're going to extend from pane. And so what we need is a few variables now. We need to know the width and height of our fan, of the available space we have. We need to know the radius to draw our fan, and the reason for this is our width and height of the available space may not be a square, so we need to calculate the appropriate size of the fan. So let's get that started now. So we'll have some private variables, width, and we'll initialize this to 200. Same as height. Next up we need a radius. So this will be another double. Call it radius. And we're going to use the math.min method to calculate the minimum of these two values. So width and height. And then we're going to multiply it by 0.5. So that'll, because, you know, what's going to happen is we end up using width or height as the diameter. So we need to divide it, times it by 0.45, which then, so we halve it, so we get our radius, and then we're also leaving a bit of space to make it look nice. So next up, we're going to be using the arc object to represent a portion of a circle. So private, this will be an array because we need a few of them. Oops. And this is, so an array, and we're going to have an array of size 4 to store the 4 blades of our fan. Next up, we need to figure out what angle we're going to be drawing our fan on. So another double, and I'll call this start angle. And we'll initialize it to 30. So next up, we want a circle object, which is going to be used to render the outline of our fan. And we can initialize this right away to width divided by 2, height divided by 2, so that's the position. I'm having a moment there. Width divided by 2, height divided by 2, and then our radius. Okay, so they are all the variables we need to store to be able to draw a fan to the screen. So next up, we're going to have our constructor. And what we're going to do inside our constructor is set up the color of our circle. Okay, so now what we're going to do is immediately add our circle to our pane, so this. And the way, so we get children dot add circle. So the circle is what we need to get the outline done. Why is this complaining? Well, I guess there are a few issues. One, I spelt double wrong. So why is this complaining? Oh, you know what? I forgot to get our import all the way up there. So now that we've done that, we should have some things disappear now. There we go. Alright, so now that we've had our constructor, we have the first bit of our constructor out the way. So at the moment, all we're going to be doing is rendering a circle. But let's do this right now. So what we'll do is back up in our start method of our fan animation class, we'll create a new circle. Sorry, a new fan pane. And now we will add this to our... Oops. Add this to the center of our pane. So now when we run our program, we get our circle rendered. Now we need to make this a little bit bigger, and that's again because of the window borders that Windows 8 uses. So let's make this a little bit taller. That's better. Okay, so what we're going to do now is back down in our constructor for fan pane is we're going to create our arcs to draw our blades. So we're going to loop because we need to create 4 and the code is exactly the same. So int I equals 0, I less than 4, I plus plus. So what we're going to do now is create our new arc. So we're going to immediately store this in our array at index I. And it's going to, so we're going to have a new arc. And you can see there are a few constructors here. Well, actually, there are 2 constructors here. And the one we want is this one. So what this takes is the position of the center point of the arc, and then the overall radius of the full circle. So an arc is just a part of a circle. So what we want is the radius of what the circle would be. And it could be an ellipse as well. So it takes in X and Y. And then the starting angle, and then the ending angle, or the... Sorry, the, yeah, you know what I mean. Anyway, so the starting position is going to be width divided by 2, height divided by 2. And then we have our radius. And we're going to make it a little bit smaller so that our fan is inset inside our circle. So we're going to multiply our radius by 0.9. Because we're using a circle, we need to specify this twice because Arc supports drawing ellipses. So now we want start angle. However, so the starting angle is going to be the position of our first blade. And then because we have 4 blades, we need to rotate each blade by 90 degrees. So what we're going to do is have our start angle plus I multiplied by 90. So the first time through this loop, it's I is equal to 0. So we just have the start angle. The next time it will be start angle plus 90 and so on. And next up, we want 35 to be the end. All right, so next up, we're going to set the fill of our arc. So again, arc at index I dot set fill. And we're going to set this to red. All right. And next up, we're going to set the type of our arc. So there's a class called arctype. And it takes in a bunch of different... Sorry, it stores a bunch of different constants. So for example, chord, which is an arc closed by drawing a straight line segment from the start to the end. We have open, which just draws the arc. It doesn't draw any endpoints and so on. And then what we want is round. And you'll see what that does in just a minute. Now, why is this complaining? Because we want the arc at index I, of course. Okay, so next up we're going to add this arc. So again, get children.add all arc at I. Okay, so let's run this program again and just see what we have now. Here it is, a beautiful red fan inside a circle with our 3 buttons that don't do anything yet. So now what we're going to do is work on the animation. So what we actually need to do is update our angles as the animation occurs. So the way we're going to do this is first we're going to get a couple of utility methods out of the way. So what we want to do is be able to set the width and the height of our pane in case our window changes size. So public void set width, and all we're going to do is say this dot width equals w, and then we're going to call a method which we haven't done yet, but is going to be called set values. Set values is the very next thing we're going to do, so I will put up with this compile error just for now. Alright, so same thing with changing the height. So next up, what we're going to do is have a method called setValues, which updates all the positions of our circle and our arc based on whether something has changed. So public void setValues. So what we're going to do is recalculate our radius. So radius equals math.min width and height multiplied by 0.545, sorry. So that's the same thing that we had up here in the start of our class. And this should be an H, not a Y. Okay, so next up we're going to update the radius of our circle using the one we just calculated. So circle dot set radius to be radius. We're also going to update the position of our circle. I made a mistake in there. We want the width divided by 2. So what we're also going to do finally is update our start angle for each of our arcs. So for int I equals 0, I less than 4, I plus plus, we're going to update the radius. So X and Y, remember, because arcs support ellipses. Update the position. And we're going to update our start angle, just in case it changes. And again, we need plus I multiplied by 90 because we have 4 fans and we want them to spread out evenly. So now when we run our program, you'll see that nothing actually happens yet. We need to do a little bit more before we can make this animation work. So what we're going to do is have a move method which is going to be our tick for an animation. So the way to think about animations is something happening at set points in time, and so what we usually end up having is a method that gets called at each one of these set points in time to actually do a step in our animation. So we're going to have a public void move method, and all we're going to do in here, actually let's not do anything yet. Let's just have a print line just for testing. We're going to jump around a bit now, so we're going to go back up into our fan animation class and inside its start method. What we're going to do now is create our timeline for controlling our animation. So what we want is a timeline object. We'll call it animation. Now, the constructor we are going to use takes in a keyframe. So the time that we're going to pass in, we're going to use the duration class to make this easier. Now, we're going to have this occur every 100 milliseconds, or 10 times per second. And what we're going to have occur in here is we're going to use a lambda, just to make things easier. So E, arrow sign, and what we're going to do is call fan.move. And that is all we need for our constructor. So we've got an animation class that when it's running calls a keyframe after 100 milliseconds. And that keyframe object calls fan.move. Next up, we want to make sure our animation loops forever. Set cycle count. And we're going to use timeline.indefinite. So it will loop forever. And now we'll make our animation start by using the play method. Okay, so now when we run our program, you can see here that move called is getting printed out over and over again. So we know our animation is working. So what we're going to do now is actually make it do something useful. Instead of printing out some debug information, what we're going to do is make our fan move. So the thing we're going to need to do at each step through our animation is update our start angle by incrementing it. And as we do this, you can imagine that because our start angle is changing, the position over time of where our fan gets drawn will appear to rotate because our start angle has changed. So what we're going to do is, just outside of this method, have our increment variable. And we'll set this to 5. So what we're going to do inside our move method is simply update the start angle. So we're going to declare a method called setStartAngle just to be encapsulating our data correctly. We'll write this method in just a second. So what we're going to have is our current start angle plus our increment. Okay, so now what we'll do is quickly create this. So public void set start angle. So what we're going to do, the reason we're actually having a method here instead of just setting the start angle variable is we need to make sure update values gets called, because otherwise nothing will appear to happen. Sorry, set values. So we're going to call that inside here. So now when we run our program, we should see our animation. And yep, there it is. We have a rotating fan working just fine. Now, you'll notice that none of our buttons do anything yet, but that's a good start. So what we're going to do now is make sure we have enough code inside our fan pane so that we can make our buttons work. And what we need to do is just have a little bit of code for our reverse operation. So we're going to have a method called reverse. And this is a very simple method. All it's going to do is multiply our increment by -1. Or in other words, increment equals negative increment. So that is all we need to reverse the direction of our animation. So now what we're going to do, now that our fan pane is more or less complete, is jump back up to our fan animation class, and just after the bit of code where we set up our timeline is set some listeners for our buttons. So bt pause dot set on action, and what we're going to do in here is have a lambda, and what this is going to do is called pause on our animation object. Similar thing for our resume button. I'm going to have a lambda which calls animation.play. Our BT reverse button is going to call the reverse method of our fan pane. Just like that. So now we can run our program again and see, starts off just like before, except now we can pause. We hit resume and our play method gets called, so our fan resumes animating. We can press the reverse button and our fan changes direction. Now there are a couple of things left to do in here, such as updating the width and height of our fan pane when our window is resized. Now this doesn't take very long, so we're going to do that right now. All we need is a listener for our width property. So what we're going to do is, after we've created our scene object, we're going to have scene.width property dot add listener. And what we're going to do in here is have another lambda, and all this needs to do is update the width. With our new scene's width. So we can copy and paste that. Probably wouldn't have been quicker to copy and paste actually. Height property dot add listener, set height, scene dot get height. So now when we run our program, we get our beautiful animating fan, and when I resize the window, you can see that our fan automatically updates to fill the available space, which is exactly what we want. So with this, that's it for this video. It was quite a long video, 27 minutes, but thank you for sticking around and listening. I hope this was useful to you. So yeah, we've learnt how to create our own custom animations using JavaFX. So thanks a lot.